Art Pearl minces few words when he speaks on the subject of education.
Over and over again, they told him when he couldn't read and he stopped trying.
But he's earned the right. He's celebrating his 89th birthday and is still actively engaged in teaching students who want to become teachers.
Every person, when they get to be 18, automatically becomes a citizen. Are they prepared for that responsibility? That's the issue.
He first came to the University of Oregon in the 1960s to take leadership of the Upward Bound program, armed with limited grant dollars and the belief that all kids can learn.
I went out of my way to recruit from populations I knew could not be admissible. I went to jails and the prisons and the programs where kids had been thrown out. I went to Tongue Point and said, give me the 6 worst people you got here. And because I was committed to the belief that if we actually encouraged people, they could succeed. When I came to this campus in 1965, I brought 160 people in who everybody had indicated that they had unfixable deficits. They couldn't learn. None of them, very few had ever passed a course at a high school level. I brought people out of prisons, and yet 4 years later they did just as well as the admissible students. And why? Because that's what you need to understand is why. Because I believe every kid can learn. Over the last 10 or 15 years, I've changed. Now I feel that at that time I was only interested in access and equity, getting people into the system. Now I'm committed to changing the system. I think the system is unbelievably flawed, that we have retreated dramatically in the last 30 years in terms of everything, that this country is I think in pretty desperate shape. It became more and more clear to me that if we're going to solve any of our problems in our society, we need a different kind of schooling. I needed to think, well, what kind of a schooling? What kind of changes we need to make? And I began to start working with what I thought made sense. Programs made sense, and it was not therapy. You weren't going to fix these people. What they needed to have is opportunity and some sense of how the world worked. So part of education has to be sense making. How do you help people understand the world they're in? And it was a much simpler world 50 years ago than it is now. And yet I think people were working harder to understand it 50 years ago than people are working to understand it now. And we did some pretty amazing things with some delinquent kids, basically by just changing what I said was the environment for learning. Teaching's a tough job. It'll wear you out. But unless you can continue to believe and encourage everybody, you're not doing your job.